Everybody, it's good to be with you. My name is Morgan Robertson. I've been a consultant and technical architect here at Eide for coming up on 12 years now. So this is kind of the stuff that I've lived and breathed for a long time and excited to share with you. So first off, just a few things about myself to help you get to know your presenter. I am a national park buff. Love all things national parks. I've got 4 beautiful daughters and a wife that we try to hit as many of them as we can. I love doing puzzles. I love to bake. I love to read, and I love all things Salesforce. So, you know, if you want to geek out afterwards with me on any of those items, feel free to stick around. Today we're going to be talking about Salesforce flows. Now, Salesforce flows have a long and varied history within the Salesforce platform. They started back in 2011 with what was known as Project Firefly. Project Firefly was really created as something of a call scripting solution, right? And you get on a phone call and we want to take people through, do this thing first, then do this thing, and then do this thing, and capture information as we go. It was very structured, not crazy flexible, but solved the business purpose that it had at the time. Now, after about 4 years of that tool being available and people starting to see that tool is becoming valuable, Salesforce went through the admin managed revolution, and they introduced Process Builder. Process Builder was built on that same flow engine, but it was a way to use it against a record triggered event. So you perform a save or a create or a delete, and you would now invoke this flow and be able to define as an admin, here are the things that I want to do. I want to update a field, I want to create a record, I want to post to Chatter. And this was great. Process Builder was awesome, except for when it wasn't, right? Everything has its limitations, everything has its trade-offs. And so Salesforce said, we've made leaps and bounds with Process Builder, but we need to do an even better job. So in 2019, they released Flow Builder. You know, it's another 4-year gap, kind of letting them have the learning. Flow Builder was a complete revamp of the Process Builder functionality. They found some inefficiencies and some patterns that they were following that were causing a few problems, and Flow Builder was the answer to that. They modernized the UI, helping us to be able to interact with it better, not requiring Flash anymore and things like that. And you can notice that here the timeline really speeds up. We go from 2019 with Flow Builder released to now Flow Builder has record triggered automations, both synchronous and asynchronous. 2021, you get the auto layout, love it or hate it, it's here to stay. You get, in 2021, they hit feature parity with Process Builder. Anything you can do in Process Builder, you can do with Flow Builder now as well. And they also put out a debugging interface, right? It's always been, with Salesforce, it's always been, you know, create the record, perform the action, and try to dig through those debug logs and figure out what it is that's actually happening. Salesforce said, we've got to fix that for our administrators, right? And so they put together a debug panel that you can step through these tools one at a time. All right, 2022, they've continued to make enhancements. They're not only getting feature parity with Process Builder, but they're also getting feature parity with workflow rules, being able to do outbound messages and some of those last remaining issue resolutions that they had. Now in 2023, Flow is the only blessed, approved declarative automation tool on the platform. Process builders are no longer available. Workflow rules are being deprecated and removed. Flow is the way to go. And they continue to make enhancements. Even as late as a few weeks ago, with the summer release notes, they've announced that now we can make get and post requests out of Flow. Normally the domain of of a Salesforce developer, now in the hands of admins. So Salesforce is really continuing to push hard on these flows. So let's talk about the paradigm, right? For the longest time, it's either been, do I use a flow or do I use code? Admins would go to any length to avoid having to touch development because they lose control, right? I can no longer maintain this myself. I can no longer update this myself. I'm always tied to that Salesforce development skill requirement to make these things happen. Developers are frustrated, right? They have to rebuild the same scaffolding pieces every single time that someone wants to use the same or similar functionality. I've got to create a trigger. I've got to create a trigger handler, or I've got to create a Visualforce page with a button to display this. So developers are frustrated because they're having to redo the same tasks over and over again. The coordination just increases timelines and testing requirements, and it's just taking long to get functionality out. And then not only do you have to write these Apex tests, now you go and add a validation rule. Now all the Apex tests are failing and you can no longer push to production, and you got to go fix all of your tests to do that again. So the world's kind of in this paradigm of, oh man, do everything I can do to keep it in flow, make massive crazy flows that will just allow me to get it done. Or I hire a developer and staff the developer to do all of these changes. And the developer's like, oh man, I'm having to make these same changes over and over again. It's not really creative or challenging to just rebuild the same piece over and over again. So let's talk about kind of the brave new world that we have with flow and code working together. Number one, it gives the admin manageability back to the user. They're able to invoke complex actions. They're able to manage these larger processes, and through configuration attributes are able to modify its behavior and really control it. The developers can focus on what they love to do best, which is being creative and creating new functionality, new features for your users, and allowing the admins to take care of the management, the maintenance, the changes, the enhancements. It simplifies maintenance. You have and modifications, right? I can go in and I can declaratively change what assignment is happening in a flow rather than having to contact the developer, put in a ticket, have them make the change, test it, wait for the deployment window, release it, verify it, or if it's urgent, put in a hotfix, all of that whole deployment lifecycle process, just reducing that time to getting the changes to your users and making things happen. All right. So let's talk about the flow engine. Salesforce eats, there's a term in the industry called eating your own dog food. Salesforce eats their own dog food, right? They create this platform, and then they use the tools that they build for us themselves to deliver functionality to us. So in the flow runtime, we have the classic or the lightning runtime, which is an Aura-based runtime, as the basis of this. We have the ability to layer in Apex code to perform actions. We layer on top of that Aura components if you're in the lightning runtime, in order to host the display within a flow. And then you have Lightning Web components on top of that can be embedded to give you the full features of the modern development lifecycle. So first, we're going to talk about extending flows using Apex. This is a function called invocable actions. Invocable actions are used when you need to do complex logic, something large, something cumbersome, loops, assignments, data transformations, those types of things. You'd also use these if Salesforce doesn't yet support the functionality. They haven't made their version of the action yet. For a long time, we had things like post to chatter in invocable actions. Now that's part of the standard flow. So over time, you'll see a lot of these kind of get some of them get moved up, some of them that are more custom to your org, we continue to enhance. All right. So when we're building an invocable action, you annotate the method, invocable method. You utilize a wrapper for the request and the response, and I'll show you why in a few minutes. Make sure to throw well-formatted exceptions. These exceptions bubble straight up to your end users in a fault element, and so you want to make sure that they're well-formatted and displayed in a way that the end user can know how to resolve them or what's going on and where they should go for help. And just remember your proper encapsulation principles from your programming classes. All right, a few more things. They need to be in their own class. It's just a Salesforce requirement. You can only have one invocable action per class. They have to be public or global. Public meaning open within your namespace, or global meaning they're open to any namespace. And they have to be static. So the reason for using the wrappers is that they always accept and return lists. This is the main difference of what happened between Process Builder and Flow Builder. Is this whole concept of bulkification. How do I take lots of things doing the same thing at the same time and bulkify it so that I only have to do it once instead of repeating over and over and over again? So you're always going to accept and return a list of records, even if you're working with this. If you are making a call out in this invocable action, yes, you can make a call out from flows, not record triggered flows, but screen flows. If you have that call out equals true attribute, that helps Salesforce to know whether or not they need to reset the transaction so that they can make the appropriate actions and conform to the platform limits. Last is you can create a Lightning Web component as a property editor. Some of these actions can get pretty complex, and simple text and number inputs might not be enough. You may have seen these types of custom property editors using some of the more complex Lightning Web component or Lightning components for Flow. Things like your data table element, where you've got an interface where you can add and manipulate columns and add and manipulate rows. That's the functionality of this type of Lightning Web component. So let's see it in action, shall we? We're going to start with a use case, round robin, right? I have a developer come to me and he looks like this. He goes, my flow isn't working. I built it. It looks great. It works great when I run one record, but it's breaking when I run multiple records. Doesn't quite work. Here's what he did. He created a round robin object, and then had the round robin assignees, or the members of that round robin. He was using a flow to filter and update the records. So you would come in and it would say, okay, this record needs to run this round robin. Go get the assignees. Here's the next one, and away we go. His flow looks something like this. So first, you get the round robin records. You update the owner, and you set the next owner on the round robin. Everything's hunky-dory, right? Well, unfortunately, no. All the records run through this at the same time. Remember that whole thing about lists? So what happens is all of the elements get collected at the same time. They all get updated at the same time, which means they all get the same owner because we haven't moved it to the next owner yet. So if one record came in at a time, it works great. It goes to the next owner and updates. If 5 records come in, all 5 records end up at the same owner. This is not something that Flow is built to do because it requires us to recursively update and potentially keep in memory the change in state. So here's how, let's see if we can implement some code in order to solve this. Okay, so we're going to pull up our action here. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so you can see. Is everyone able to see clearly on the screen? I'll take silence as assent. All right. So we've created our public class. We have our static method. It's going to take in a list of records, this round robin inbound record. It's going to give us information about what we want to actually do. And it's going to give back a list of generic S objects. We want to make this reusable, whether you're round robining leads, round robining opportunities, round robining cases. So we try to make it flexible there. Our @invocable method annotation comes in. We give it a label and a description so that the admin can see and what's going on, how to use it. We can give them some instructions. Now within the code, this is a pretty simple piece of code, right? We're going to take in the name of the round robin we want to run the record through, and the actual record that we're running it through. Okay, we bring it in here, and we're going to initialize our round robin object. So we come in, we're going to query for our round robin assignees, populate the map so we have them all. There, and then we come through, and as we loop through, we're just going to call the assign method. Get the name, and here's the record. If we get a round robin, great. Assign that round robin as the owner, and then do a little bit of logic to move it to the next owner. And if you're at the end of the list, go back to the first assignee. And then we have a finish method down here to update the values. So we come in, we're going to go through our loop of records, update them in memory, then we save them to the database, save our round robin records, and we have, you know, our nice error message for the user if something goes wrong. Okay. So nice and simple, short little snippet of code. Now our flow looks like this. First, we come in and we say, okay, is this record one that needs assignment? We're going to take that, collect all of them that do require round robin, regardless of what that round robin is, send them all into the action and perform that same list of actions that we did in our original flow, but this time it does it in memory, saves it all, and returns back in one shot. All right. Okay, let's talk about some additional use cases. Lead convert. Salesforce does not currently have a lead convert action available in a flow. Not that they couldn't, it's just that they haven't created it yet. That's one that I get asked for quite frequently is, hey, can we get a lead convert action so that I can automatically convert these leads? A duplicate record check. So your duplicate management function within Salesforce, where you can define these fields would make a duplicate record. You can actually access that from Apex. And you can do it not just on records in the database, but you can say, if I were to create a record like this, what would I get back? Would I get back a warning? Would I get back some duplicates? We can create a invocable action to go and pull that information, pull that in. Password management and resets. I can actually create a flow that will guide the user through a registration process or a password reset process that I can elevate the privileges within that flow to give an end user access to reset their own password instead of having to wait for the administrator to do so. Call outs to external systems. Salesforce's ability to call out from flow has some very specific limits around it. It has to follow a very specific authentication method. It has to follow a very specific format. If it doesn't conform to those, we can absolutely do it here. Or some complex logic, right? I have an opportunity that moves to close one. I want to take that opportunity and opportunity products and move them into a project with tasks or a work order with work order line items or anything along those lines. So there's a whole host of opportunities that we can do here. All righty. Before we move on, want to stop and make sure there are no other questions. All right. Then here's what we're going to go ahead and move to the next use case. But I don't like clicking the next button. I hate the next button, right? It's always down there at the bottom of the screen. You got to do your thing up in the top, and then you always have to go click next. One of the #1 complaints I get from people when I say, "Hey, let's use a flow to do this." Like, I don't like the next button. I want a custom UI because I want to be able to interact with it. Let's talk about what you can do with the Lightning Web Component. There's 2 ways that these apply. #1 is with what's called a screen component, and #2 is a headless action. Now, the Lightning Web Component is a completely customizable flow screen. I can take that entire real estate of the flow screen and do anything that Lightning Web Components can do. I can scan barcodes. I can hit external APIs. I can do just about anything, right? I can also leverage the Flow's functionality to manage the sequence and ordering. You've seen one of the very common requests when we get into complex flows is, I want to see my progress through a path. And I want to be able to click and go to that specific element. And I want to be able to jump back and jump forward and jump around within this flow. Normally in flows, next, or back, right? With a Lightning Web Component, we have more flexibility than that. We can create a new UI that allows us to direct the flow in a more organic fashion. Okay. With headless actions, on the other hand, this is a way to offload processing. Okay. Salesforce Apex has its limits, right? Multi-tenant platform. We want to be able to control what we are able to do and see. If you need to do some heavy processing, you can delegate that to the browser of the computer that's running it. And you can do that through a headless action. It's just an element that appears on the screen, doesn't have any UI. To the user, it'll appear like a little spinner that's just running and doing some work. When that action is invoked, it can pull information, it can make repeated callouts to Apex, it can call out to third-party systems. You're allowed to do anything that you would normally do in the Lightning Web Component. And so you can offload some of that high volume data processing or data transformation. All right, so let's look at what a Lightning Screen Component would look like. So #1, in your meta XML file, you need to target the Lightning Flow Screen attribute. #2, you need to annotate any input variables and output variables with the @API annotation, right? We want to expose them to the world so that they can get them going in or going out. You can set up your standard property configurations or set up the Lightning Web Component to be the configurator for your screen component. A little bit meta there where we're using a Lightning Web Component to configure Lightning Web Component. And the last thing is that you would import from the flow navigation module that you can get the flow attribute change event and the flow navigation events. This is what allows you to go forward and backward within the flow. So when you're capturing inputs, again, the target config, Lightning Flow Screen, you've got a name, label, type, and role. Role tells you whether it's input, output, or both. Name, label, type, just like they sound. The API name of the object, the user-friendly label that will appear in the configuration editor, and what data type is it. And then as far as outputs go, there's 2 ways to publish an output. One is the flow attribute change event. This event does get fired when you hit the next button. So if you're just planning on moving to the next screen, you don't have to fire it multiple times. You don't have to fire both events. If you want your component to be reactive with other components on the page, let's say I put a property in to my screen, and I want something to change elsewhere based on that screen shown, based on the value I pick within my component, that's when you use the flow attribute change event, because it will publish that change and the rest of the flow screen reacts to that change immediately instead of waiting for the next button or for it to go through a validation sequence. Okay, so let's talk about a use case for this. Add another, right? How often have you gotten into a flow and said, okay, I need to take in a set of things. I need to take in a list. And you have to go, oh man, I'm gonna have to either take in exactly one, or I'm gonna have to keep going through and have a radio button that says, do I want to add another? Yes, okay, hit next, and then it'll loop me back. So this is a little bit improved UI from having to select that radio button at the bottom or just building out multiple inputs in a sequence. Here's what it looks like. It's just this little component at the bottom. All it is 2 buttons. That's it. You can place it anywhere on the screen. You know, I've got here a table of the items up above, and then I can give a custom prompt and have my component at the bottom. This is an example of, I don't want to always take over the whole screen, right? If I take over the whole screen, then the developer has to make changes to the whole screen. I want to build components that my admins can use in order to make it modular. I can add add another yes, no button, have it do its functionality, but I don't care what else is on the page. You can use this anywhere you want and it will function the same way. So let's take a look at the code. So we've got some classes here that make it center and lay out nicely. 2 buttons, one with a no, one with a yes. And we have some properties here for what do we want the affirmative label to be? What do we want the negative label to be? Input only. What is the output value? Is it true or is it false? And then you can take that and assign it, act on it within your flow. Okay. Here's the JavaScript for this. Again, very simple. I have to have my labels. Oh, API enabled. When I have a yes or a no, I'm going to pass in that parameter, and then I simply dispatch my flow navigation next event, right? Because I'm going to be navigating the page, it will automatically fire those change events for me. Okay, let's do another example. Here is a example where, again, I've got multiple pieces on the page, right? These properties up here at the top, these are just standard properties that we have on our screen. Just the standard toggle, and we can take all of the different pieces from it. Down below, this is our custom screen. I want to be able to select, is it the seller or the buyer, or is it another party completely? What is their address? I want to display a little map so that I can confirm that you're talking about the same place I'm talking about. Give people a little bit of location. I can say, you know, do they have a customer contact already established on this buyer account? You know, is this the person that I'm sending it to? And just be able to select it. Or I can say, hey, no, this is somebody else, and put in that information, require that information, and then communicate between the different components on the screen. Okay, headless actions. So kind of diving in, this has a slightly different target. It's a lightning record action. Has a single API method that's called invoke. You can do anything you want on the browser. So you can cause the browser to navigate, so it'll actually leave the flow and jump to another page. You can do the client-side processing, anything that's native JavaScript you can do within here. So here's another common use case that we get is flow redirect. looks like I do not have that code up. What I do have is the flow control Boolean. You can see here some of the same snippets that I showed earlier. The flow redirect, what it'll look like is something a little bit like this. You'll have a single element with @invoke or @API. Call invoke, and then you can do something like window.location.href equals target. Up here we would take @API and declare a variable target and give that a default of blank, which just refreshes the page. The other option that you have within here is, so this would be the native JavaScript way. We can also call one of the Salesforce navigation events, pull that import in, and that way you're only reloading a portion of the screen instead of the screen as a whole. All right, so as promised, there is a bit.ly link and a QR code that you can utilize in order to get to this code repo that I shared here today. It's also got a copy of the PowerPoint within it. So you would be able to review any of the slides, any of the information that we've presented today, as well as the code samples that we have for the flow control and the round robin, in case you or your developer counterparts are interested in working on some of these items. At this point, we're going to go ahead and open it up for any questions that you have around Flow's code and how they interact. All right then. Well, in the absence of any questions, I'd just like to say thank you for coming and listening this morning. If you do have any further questions about flows or code, or any other questions that you have around your Salesforce.com instance, how to develop securely and scalably on it, feel free to reach out to myself at the contact information there, or through your account executive or project manager, and we can get you connected with the resources that are going to be able to help. Thank you for your time today.